Good to have you along here, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett here with you on this Tuesday. A lot to get to here on the show. We'll chat with Rich Stiles, host of the Back Nine Boys Golf Show. We got the Open Championship upcoming this weekend. Also, Mark Bradley with the AJC.com with some bold predictions for the upcoming football season. And Will Vanderhort, the ClemsonInsider.com, will join us coming up in just a little bit. We got the All-Star game coming up later tonight, BJ, and of course the Home Run Derby last night. Pete Alonso wins it, but again, we had a lot of drama out there last night, and of course Shohei Ohtani taking the stage was your pick. I believe you and Ben and several on the show picked Ohtani. I had Juan Soto. He went one round further, obviously, than Ohtani. Everybody lost ultimately to Pete Alonso, but again, a good showcase of some of the game's talent last night there in Colorado.
Yeah, a lot of fun, and I know Ben's a big fan of Pete Alonso, former Florida Gator, and for him to go back-to-back, very impressive, because we were even talking about Pete Alonso, Ben, and you, or Kevin, and you said, hey, look, guys don't go back-to-back. It's never the favorite, and guys don't go back-to-back. And we mentioned a couple of guys. I said keep an eye on Salvador Perez. I think he hit the most home runs ever for a catcher, but Kevin, it was a show, man. I mean, you talk about some of the home runs. Didn't Soto have one that was like 530 feet? And then Ohtani, I believe, for the first time since they've started keeping track of the length of the home runs, had, 6 home runs of 500 feet or more. That's absurd. That's video game stuff. And then you talk about what Alonso did, at the end. It was a lot of fun. And when you see baseballs going 475, 500, 525, it's amazing to see. But I thought Ohtani put on a show. I thought Perez did well. Soto had a couple of just absolute, just no doubters. And then you look at, Ohtani and just the way that he so easily and naturally can just knock a ball 500 feet. It was absolutely amazing to see.
Yeah, you don't get an appreciation for some of that stuff unless you're kind of there. I remember a couple years ago, we went to, or the All-Star game was in Miami, right? And they had the All-Star game, had the home run derby, and you saw a couple of guys hit balls off like the back wall of the stadium there. And I just happened to go on vacation like the week after the All-Star break to Miami, and sitting behind home plate, you're like, that's where dude hit the home run. And I'm like, that just totally put it more in perspective, like just how much a hold they got of some of those baseballs to put them that far out of there, man. So you hear like 500 feet, it doesn't quite compute, but if you put it into perspective, like the center field wall at Truist Park is 400 feet. They were hitting balls 120 feet past that. In the game, in the home run derby last night. And, you think like 375, that's like 150 feet past the corner walls at a lot of ballparks, man. It's just crazy how far those guys are hitting baseballs in the home run derby. And again, good for Pete Alonso. He was mashing balls. I know Christian said, hey, the guy throwing him BP was just laying him right in there. He actually said, would I be the perfect guy to throw batting for the home run derby? No, I wouldn't. 100% not, because one, I'm not that consistently accurate. And two, like, I think my competitive juice would take over and I'd be like, you're not taking me deep. And I would try my best to not give up as many home runs. But no, you
have the perfect 75 mile an hour fastball, because you don't want it to be like 50 and you don't want it to be like 90. So we all know you can throw a 75 mile an hour heater. So I think, that's what Christian was getting at. But I did want to say this about Alonso. Congratulations to Alonso. But hopefully he got all the home runs out of him, because I know a lot of people have said, hey, keep an eye on him in the second half because the home run totals haven't been quite there in the first half. Well, I believe, Kevin, the Braves play 5 against the Mets to round out the month. So hopefully Pete Alonso got all his home run swings out of him, so we won't see many in a couple of weeks at the end of the month.
No, there may be something to that. We shall see. But again, I think what a fun exhibition. A lot of us, first time to really get a look at Ohtani and what he could do. And again, I think he got tired a little bit as it went on. And you're like, people don't appreciate. They're like, why can't he just keep hitting home runs? Like, well, it's hard to do that. Like, you're exerting some effort to do that. And he and Soto went basically 3 rounds before they decided who was going to go there and move forward. I thought the format was kind of interesting. I think baseball's kind of got a good little thing going, BJ, where you look at what happened last night with Alonso in the first round. He went up against Perez from the Royals. Perez actually hit, I believe, the second most homers of anybody in the first round and didn't even come close to moving on. And so he becomes an afterthought, but he hit more home runs and got knocked out than both Soto or Ohtani did in the kind of 3 rounds they had to go through to find out. So kind of amazing. Sometimes it's just luck of the draw. I started thinking that last night. I tuned in and I was like, okay, BJ and Ben, they picked Ohtani. I went with Soto. Oh, great. They're playing in the first round. This ought to be just fantastic. And, but baseball really, I think, has got a good thing going with the home run derby. And at least seems like guys want to do it. Unlike, the slam dunk contest, guys kind of do it once. They're like, all right, I don't want to do it anymore. At least it seems like guys want to do it in Major League Baseball.
Well, and you're right. The format's interesting, but I thought for baseball, you had generational talents on display. I mean, Soto, we know about Soto, obviously, in the NL East. I mean, just a beautiful swing. Ohtani is a once-in-a-lifetime talent and going to start the game tonight for the AL, which is just ridiculous. You think about doing that last night and doing this
lead the
tonight.
game off when they come up to that.
Yeah, he's just beyond compare in terms of his ability, the natural athleticism, the fluidity. I mean, it's fun to sit back and just watch him swing, watch him go to work. But there were generational talents on display for baseball.
So that's going on last night. You got the game tonight. I know several players have opted out of the game tonight, citing, I guess, the rest and workload management, if you will. So we'll see how many of these guys we see in action tonight. But you also had a lot of folks up in arms yesterday, BJ, because Team USA, gasp, lost in basketball to Australia, which meant 2 losses in a row for Team USA getting ready for the Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, disappointing. And you're talking about, Damian Lillard, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, Jason Tatum. I mean, you have a squad out there, and I think the talent with some of your opponents has clearly improved, and you have NBA players all around the world representing their different countries. But here's where I am with this, okay? It's disappointing to see Team USA basketball lose, especially when you think about the fact that historically that has not happened. I believe we're now looking at the first time they've ever lost back-to-back games with pros. Remember, for a while, they had college players, but first time you have back-to-back losses with pros, but these have been exhibitions. So that's kind of where I'm pumping the brakes a little bit, saying, let's wait and see. And I know Greg Popovich was saying some of that. Listen, the talent is good that we're going up against, and it's an exhibition. It's an exhibition stretch. So I still think Team USA is the favorite to win the gold. We'll have to see. I try not to get too worked up over exhibitions, or like you would say with soccer, Kevin, the friendlies. But I understand the disappointment. I understand the frustration, but they are just exhibitions.
Are you at the point, though, when it comes to like certain sports where you just look at it and say, I don't care how good the other countries have gotten with basketball, like the U.S. should not be losing to anybody? Like, are you there with that take?
I mean, maybe look, credit the other countries. You've seen improvement, across the board. But I do think that Team USA, when you're playing for a medal, when you're playing for it all, I think they will be the favorites. And you look at a roster again: Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, Damian Lillard. You're talking about Tatum. You're talking about Adebayo. You're talking about really good players, depth, roster balance. You're not overly dependent on 1 or 2 guys. I think this team will be better when it matters, but credit the opponents, Nigeria and Australia, for winning these games. But I think if you're Team USA, and this is what Popovich has said, you got to look at it as, look, it's an exhibition. It is what it is. Move forward, and you focus on winning games when they officially count for the Olympics. And I still think, do you think Team USA is still the favorite to win the gold? I do.
They should be. I mean, if you were playing international competition, and even without the LeBrons and some of those, you have Kevin Durant and legitimate all-stars, at least in the starting lineup, like you should be beating pretty much everybody without question.
But that's what I'm asking. In terms of winning the medal, do you still feel like they're the favorite to win the gold?
Of course. If they don't, it'll be very disappointing. Very, very disappointing if they don't come home with the gold. But that, again, I don't know that it's that way in every sport. I feel like I think baseball is an Olympic sport now. So it's like, if we don't win the gold in baseball, is that the end all be all? Baseball is such an international thing now. You look at the home run derby last night, and I think you had guys from all over the globe kind of participating in that thing. Guys from all over the globe participating in the All-Star weekend. as well. So I think the rest of the world's kind of caught up. I think basketball, I mean, you look at it, you're kind of a byproduct of what you put out there, right? You go look at some of these other countries, you have NBA guys coaching these other national teams. So, of course, they're going to impart that knowledge. You're going to see the skill level come up. And as that happens, guess what? They're going to beat you occasionally as they start using their pros and they get better and better. So I think that is kind of to be expected. But yeah, no, we should be winning the gold, and that's it. No ifs, hands, or
Look,
buts.
there's talent. There's talent everywhere. I think some of the pundits have said maybe Team USA needs to be a little more active and effective defensively, and maybe that's something we see once we get into the games that count. But look, credit those other teams, and if you're Team USA, you realize you got to be better than what you've been, and it's going to count for real here soon.
Yeah, going to be interesting to watch once the Olympics get here. We've got so much to get to here on 3 and Out, including, speaking of All-Stars, kind of an interesting exercise by Steve Lassen with Athlon. We'll get to that coming up in just a little bit. Also, Southern Pigskin, you have the SEC West predictions up. BJ, we'll run down and see what you guys with Southern Pigskin, what we at Southern Pigskin think is going to happen there in the West. We've got more to come. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you here on this Tuesday, Kevin Thomas. BJ Bennett. Bennett will be back with us tomorrow on the program. And BJ, great exercise there by Steve Lassen of Athlon, talking about the, I guess, correlation. We were at All-Star break. Said, what if we did an All-Star game, SEC West versus SEC East? And so we kind of put it together, offense v defense. And if you want to know where the balance of power is in the SEC, BJ, wow. I mean, it kind of shows up. We're like, hey, great players, but you start stacking them side by side. What do you think the final outcome of that would be?
Yeah, it is interesting. I thought it was kind of cool when you lay the talent out, and it's basically a preseason all-division team for the East and the West, and it's a much more balanced lineup in terms of proven commodities and proven production for the West. And I mean, you even look at the offensive playmakers. We were talking about it during the show meeting. I mean, Matt Corral handing the ball off to Tank Bigsby and Isaiah Spiller and Jerry Ely and Traylon Burks, John Mechie, Kayshon Boutte, third receiver. He had a 300-yard game last year. You're talking about Jalen Weidermeyer at tight end, and then up front, Evan Neal, Kenyon Green. These are all-American type blockers. You have really good players, obviously, but less proven with the East, where Steve has JT Daniels as the number one quarterback, Kevin Harris and Chris Rodriguez, an elite running back tandem. The wide receivers, Jermaine Burton, Jalen Hyatt, and Cam Johnson, probably not as accomplished as the wide receivers for the West. Now, Athlon has Eric Gilbert, the Georgia hybrid, listed as a tight end, so take that for what you will. But, yeah, I think the star power with the teams right now in terms of the depth is in the West, and I think the star power with the players in the West. And I do think I kind of broke it up: backfield, playmakers, O-line, D-line, linebackers, secondary. The only group where I would give the East the advantage would be on the defensive line: Jordan Davis, Zachary Carter, Kingsley Enagbare. You're talking about some of the best players in the country, and it's a slight edge. I would give the East over the West. But you just look at the superstars in the league, Kev. Again, Matt Corral, Tank Bigsby, John Mechie. You go to defense, DeMarvin Leal, LeBrian Ray, Christian Harris, Will Anderson, Derek Stingley, obviously. So great players, of course, in the SEC East. But yes, I thought it was interesting when you lay it out and you look at it side by side in terms of guys that are considered national award contenders or all-American type candidates. You have more of those guys on the West than you do on the East. And, you know, trying to pick a score, we were talking about that. I mean, I think that offense for the West would be brutal in this hypothetical game. I mean, I think you're looking at maybe something like 34-20, the West. Corral and Bigsby in the same backfield. Can you imagine that? And the wide receivers, Traylon Burks at Arkansas is really good. John Mechie at Alabama, I mean, he's the next in line. He's going to be a superstar. But a lot of Georgia representation in the East. I think you see a little more roster balance in the West, where you have guys from Bama, guys from Auburn, guys from LSU, guys from A&M, a quarterback from Ole Miss. But, yeah, it's fun to think about.
Would you actually like to see this, like, attempted? Like, on the field? I know it's tough. I was like, when would you play it? I get it. But, like, would you like to see this, like, actually come to fruition and say, hey, we're going to do an SEC All-Star game and just see what happens? Like, would you be interested in seeing that come to fruition on the field?
Yeah, of course, it's not realistic to think about, right, because of the logistics. But would I watch this? Yes. I mean, would I watch an SEC versus ACC all-conference challenge? I mean, there are probably some SEC fans right now going, hey, let's do SEC versus everybody else. You'll have the all-SEC team take on the all-American team minus the SEC.
Preseason, two-hand touch. No, so you're trying to eliminate guys getting unnecessarily hurt. First part of August, right after media days, we do it. Could we make this happen?
Absolutely not. No chance. No. This is fun to think about. This is fun to talk about. But no, these guys are getting ready for the start of the season. But it is interesting to kind of split it up, because it gives you a look, at least division wide, kind of macro, at where some of the strengths and weaknesses are within the division. Like, to me, when you look at this Athlon Sports preseason all-West team, boy, the offensive line really stands out. The playmakers really stand out in terms of the running backs, the wide receivers. You go to the defensive side of the ball, I think the back seven, the linebackers, Christian Harris, Grant Morgan, who led the SEC in tackles, Will Anderson, really stands out. And you look at the East, I think the first thing that stands out to me in the East are the running backs. And I've said this on the show before. I think Kevin Harris is the best running back in the SEC. And that's with all due respect to Tank Bigsby. I think Isaiah Spiller's fantastic. But Kevin Harris, going for 15 touchdowns, 6 yards a carry, close to 1,200 yards last year, pretty unparalleled. So I like the running backs in the East. You don't have the proven playmakers to the extent you do in the West at wide receiver. And again, some Georgia fans may see this and take Eric Gilbert being listed at tight end as being the wrong position. I know he's going to be used primarily as a wide receiver at Georgia, but then you get into the defensive side of the ball with the East, and I think maybe some questions on the back end, at least in terms of some new guys coming in with Kendrick and Smith. But I think the defensive line is really impressive. But again, one thing that also stands out to me, Kevin, is you see, at least at first glance, what looks like a little more balance in terms of school representation on the West, compared to the East. But I think that's reflective of what we anticipate, right? I mean, whether we talk to Phil Steele or Steve Lasson, everybody you talk to says it's Georgia by a considerable margin in the East. And then a lot of people think it's Florida, but some even say, is the door open for Kentucky and then Missouri? And then after that, if we're being honest, a lot of the conversation kind of dips. You don't know what to expect with Tennessee, uncertainty with South Carolina. Vanderbilt is Vanderbilt right now. Whereas in the West, everybody's got an argument. I mean, Mississippi State, who appears to be the team that a lot of people are picking last, they beat LSU in their first game after being defending national champs in Baton Rouge. So a lot of talent. I think there's more talent right now, at least in terms of proven, experienced playmakers in the West. But Matt Corral, Kevin, the quarterback for the West, JT Daniels, the quarterback for the East. In your mind, what does JT Daniels have to do to be that to get to that all-conference level, being the quarterback there for the Dogs?
I mean, I think obviously you're going to have to put up some pretty impressive numbers because Matt Corral is going to, right? I mean, Matt Corral is going to put up just sick numbers at the end of the day because of the offense that Lane Kiffin runs. So if you're JT Daniels, I think there were times, even as good as he has been, where you'd say, okay, maybe they relied a little bit more on the run game, or he was kind of okay in the passing game. So, I mean, I think consistently you're going to have to have big Saturdays because, Matt Corral is probably going to drop 300 every weekend, at least, in that offense. There's a good possibility, depending on who Georgia's playing, JT Daniels may only go for like $180 or $220 because the running game is good. So I think to kind of separate himself, he would need to have like a couple of 300-400 yard potentially passing games if possible, which in the SEC is going to be tough. But I think when you have guys that are going to put up eye-popping numbers, that's what you need. And do you expect JT Daniels to put up eye-popping numbers? I expect him to put up solid, consistent numbers, a la Jake Fromm, maybe a little bit better than Jake Fromm. I don't expect to have just a 35, 40 touchdown type year out of JT Daniels. Do you? I mean, I think that's what it would take to kind of make you think, dang, he might be over the top of Matt Corral.
I don't think we know yet, because even what we saw of JT Daniels last year was in a limited kind of rally to the finish type stretch for him. I think there's the potential he's more productive than a lot of people think. But I do want to bring this up because you made an interesting comparison to Matt Corral and Ole Miss's offense, right? And I think if you go ask 100 people, hey, the Ole Miss offense, Matt Corral, they'll say, oh man, they throw it all over the field. Matt Corral had 28 touchdown passes and, putting up huge numbers, throwing for 300-400 yards a game. And that's true. But if you go back and look at last season's production totals, Ole Miss led the SEC in rushing. Ole Miss led the SEC in rushing last year. Not Alabama, not South Carolina. It was Ole Miss. And I think that's a potential model for Georgia. Now, I know Ole Miss plays with more pace offensively than Georgia does, and they're probably going to get more snaps. And, defensively, sometimes Ole Miss is just out there, and they really struggled last year. But I think when you look at what Georgia could be, right, with the playmakers out wide, with JT Daniels, with not only one good back, quality back, but 3-4, I think Ole Miss and what Lane Kiffin was able to do last year is a model for not just Georgia, but everybody when you want to be balanced. Ole Miss has one of the best quarterbacks in the country in Matt Corral. Could be the number one overall pick next year, is clearly the preseason All-SEC quarterback, is going to be in the Heisman Trophy conversation. But with that passing game production, they still led the league in rushing. And I think if you're Georgia, that type of potency would be the goal, where JT Daniels emerges as a national name. JT Daniels has games where he's leading the way, he's lighting it up, but consistently you're still winning at the line of scrimmage, still running the football, and that's what Ole Miss was able to do a year ago.
And again, I think we might get a better sense of what the Todd Monken offense wants to be here in 2021. Remember, no spring last year. Obviously, every week was just stress-filled for everybody, like who's available, who could potentially be available. Let's just get the game in and try to see what we can do. I think you might see a little bit truer sense of what Todd Monken wants Georgia to be here in 2021. We've got more to come here on 3 and Out. We'll flip over to that western side. BJ, Southern Pigskin got the SEC West predictions up. We'll let you know kind of where things sit when we return. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to have you along here on 3 and Out. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, glad you are with us. SouthernPigskin.com. We got the SEC East predictions out late last week, BJ. Now you got the SEC West predictions up. I'm going to go out on a limb and let people know that Southern Pigskin thinks pretty highly of Alabama. I'll let you fill in the gaps from there. That's all I'll say.
No, that's fair. That's a good starting point for just about any season. And listen, first off, this division is just amazing. The depth, the coaching, the talent. It's unfortunate somebody's got to be 7th, 6th, 5th, etc. But all of these teams are capable of playing with just about anybody. And even if you look at the teams at the bottom that we'll get to, if they were in another division, I don't necessarily think they'd be in the same spot. But yes, even though Alabama loses a lot, and they lost a lot, 5 first-round picks on offense alone, I think, you're still talking about right up there with Clemson, but probably even beyond Clemson and Ohio State, the most talented team in the country with all that's coming back. And they're going to be really good right at the line of scrimmage again. Defensively, maybe Alabama wasn't elite last year. That's going to change. I know Christian's talked about this. It's a big addition. Henry To'o, the all-SEC linebacker from Tennessee, in case you missed this a couple of weeks ago, transferred to Alabama. Go along with Chris Harris and Will Allen. I mean, that is the best collection of linebackers in the country. And then up front with LeBrian Ray and DJ Dale and Fedarian Mathis. I mean, this front seven is as good as it gets in college football. And then, oh, by the way, the back end, you have Josh Jobe was the first four. I mean, this might be the best Alabama defense we've seen in a couple of years. And even if you anticipate, just because of the receivers and the linemen and Mac, just a little bit of a step back offensively, defensively, I think you're going to see major improvement from Alabama. I think this is going to be, Kevin, kind of a vintage Alabama defense where if you can score more than 14, 17 points on them, even in this era of offensive fireworks, that's going to be really impressive. But I think Bryce Young's going to do a great job. The quarterback had a great spring game. He's kind of been groomed for this moment. He's got all the smart, big, strong, athletic. Can throw downfield, also can move around a little bit. Played at Mater Day where JT Daniels played, one of the top power programs in high school football. So he's accustomed to the big stage and he knows the expectations. He knows, Mac Jones and Tua and Jalen Hurts, but I think he's going to do a really good job. And I'm excited to see him get the opportunities he's going to get. John Mechie is going to have a huge season out wide. He's the next All-American receiver. They're going to run the ball. Brian Robinson's probably the top option there. But, Kevin, we always overlook this group. Alabama's offensive line, really, really good. Evan Neal, the offensive tackle who started since day one as a freshman, might be the best offensive lineman in the country. Maybe you see Bama run the ball a little bit more, but I think you're going to see Young and Mechie have a great connection downfield, Slade Bolden potentially out wide. But I really like this defense. And to me, in an era of offense, this is one of those few teams that can shut you down and win games on defense.
Can they be gotten? And obviously we could talk about who's number 2, but is there a team in the West that can get them?
That's a good question. And there seems to be a lot of people kind of split between LSU and Texas A&M. For me, I think A&M, I'll go with a slight edge over LSU. A&M, you have the questions at quarterback replacing Kellen Mond. I think Haynes King's going to do a good job. Is going to get the first chance there. But defensively, they return 9 starters, a couple of All-American guys. DeMarvin Leal, who we mentioned, is going to be a first-round pick along the defensive line. You have great playmakers at running back, wide receiver, tight end. Isaiah Spiller is one of the top running backs in the country. So if you have a new quarterback, right, and you're transitioning to a new face under center when you've had Kellen Mond there for 4 years, what do? You need to run the football. You need to let your playmakers make plays. And I think A&M is going to be able to do that. Kenyon Green up front is an All-American guard, veteran experience in the secondary. And I think just maybe a little more consistency right now with A&M compared to LSU, and that's why I lean A&M over LSU. But I think LSU is capable of beating anybody on their schedule. And they have questions, right? Who's going to be the starting quarterback? Is it Miles Brennan? Is it Max Johnson? Does that become a controversy? Your offensive line just lost one of your starters to Kentucky as a grad transfer, but you still have Austin Deculus. You still have big-time playmakers out wide, Kayshon Boutte. Your defensive line is really experienced. And then in the secondary, come on, you have Derek Stingley and Eli Ricks. And I think LSU struggled last year in the secondary. I do not expect to see that this season. Stingley is as good as it gets. He's the best corner in the country. And I think those two teams are the top challengers to Alabama, to me, in some order. You're talking about Texas A&M and LSU. And I lean slight advantage A&M, Kev, as the top challenger to Alabama.
All right, so obviously you have LSU right there behind them. Who might be a big surprise team in your estimation there in the West? I guess either good or bad, if you want to do it that way. Who might be the biggest surprise one way or the other for you?
Yeah, and I have Ole Miss coming in at 4, and I think it's in large part due to Matt Corral and just the cohesion, the effectiveness, the chemistry with Lane Kiffin offensively, what they've been able to do. Matt Corral gives you a chance to win any and every game, and what we mentioned last segment, a lot of people don't realize or don't remember that Ole Miss led the SEC in rushing. So when you look at this offense, not only do you have a potential first-round pick at quarterback in Matt Corral, a guy who most people feel like is the top quarterback in the SEC, you have an all-SEC type running back in Jerry Anili and a group, an offensive line, a number of backs that helped you lead the league in rushing. Now, the question for Ole Miss is, can you be better defensively? And, Kevin, when I think about Ole Miss and their defense, it kind of reminds me of what you've long said about the Atlanta Falcons, right? You don't have to be elite, but can you be okay? And you were really bad last year in terms of the production you gave up, and you were still, even with that, those struggles defensively, a team that was able to get into the postseason, a team that was able to win games in the SEC. So if you can make modest progress defensively, which I expect to see, I think Ole Miss can emerge as one of those teams that can beat you. And, Auburn, there are just so many unknowns. I think Auburn is very capable of playing with anybody on their schedule. Tank Bigsby is an All-American type talent at running back. What are you going to get out of Bo Nix, right? As a freshman, really good. As a sophomore, inconsistent. And I think what you see there is going to answer a lot of questions. You have a new staff, of course, coming in with Brian Harsin and some very good coordinator hires. But will there be a transition of sorts in year one for Brian Harsin coming to the SEC? Potentially. I like some of the pieces defensively. So Kobe McLean, Smoke Monday, Owen Popo. I think it's hard to differentiate, Kevin. I mean, after Alabama, 2, 3, 4, 5 are really, really close. I mean, you could move programs around, move teams around, and I don't think, most people would bat an eye. This is a really balanced and deep division. But I think at this point, because of Matt Corral, maybe I lean Ole Miss slightly ahead of Auburn there in the middle.
And again, obviously, Ole Miss, a lot of people are expecting some big things from there with Lane Kiffin. And as you said, Matt Corral, somebody's got to be down near the bottom. We've talked about pretty much everybody. It sounds like all that's left is Arkansas and Mississippi State. That's 2 second-year coaches obviously trying to find their way there in the West.
And I think this just goes to show you how good the division is, right? I mean, you look at Arkansas. Arkansas exceeded expectations in year one with Sam Pittman. You look at Mississippi State, they didn't finish the season in terms of the regular season well, but beat Tulsa in a bowl game, obviously beat the defending national champs in week 1. This just goes to show how tough it is to win in the SEC West. And I'll lean Arkansas right now. I think they're a little better defensively. Arkansas, that foundation defensively is back, where you have Grant Morgan, who we talked about at linebacker, Bumper Pool, one of Ben's favorite players at linebacker. Jalen Catalon is back as a dynamic difference maker at safety. I think when you talk about their offense, KJ Jefferson moves into the quarterback role, but he has playmakers around him. Traylon Burks is one of the best wide receivers in the country. If you don't know about Traylon Burks, you will this fall. You're going to see him on highlights. And I think at the line of scrimmage, right, that's where Sam Pittman wants to win games. That's where he's focused recruiting efforts. I think you'll see Arkansas be pretty good up front on the offensive line and on the defensive line. Mike Leach has his quarterback at Mississippi State, Will Rogers. And Georgia fans, you should remember Will Rogers last year as a freshman in Athens making some big-time throws against an elite defense. I think Mississippi State is one of those teams that you look at and you go, I'm not looking forward to this game because it's such a difficult matchup. They have playmakers out wide. They're going to throw the ball around. Defensively, they're better than you think. Emmanuel Forbes was one of the leaders nationally in interceptions a year ago. But I think it's just about that consistency, right, with Mississippi State. We saw them against LSU, against Tulsa, play really well and find ways to keep defenses off balance and stay in that offensive rhythm. But you also had games like against Kentucky where they just couldn't get it going. And if you're Mississippi State and you're really reliant upon one aspect of your offense providing production, when that isn't in rhythm, you're going to struggle and it's going to impact your whole team. But just to talk about this division, again, one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC and Will Rogers is at Mississippi State. So the SEC West is brutal. I don't think there's that much of a difference between, once you get past Alabama, between some of the teams kind of at the top in the middle and some of the teams that are at the bottom. That's what makes the SEC West the SEC West, is that there is no off week. You have big-time coaches at every program. You have, teams that finish in the top 20 in the recruiting rankings every year that are 5th, 6th, 7th in this division on paper. Do I expect some surprises? Yeah, I do. And Kevin, we've talked about this. To me, just to kind of do a brief summary, Auburn's the hardest team to get a feel for. And you could probably say that every single season about Auburn. The old joke with Auburn is when you pick them high, they're not going to make a bowl game. And when you pick them, to do poorly, they're going to go play for the national championship. But it's an interesting team because you have a third-year starter at quarterback. That is extremely rare in college football. You have one of the top running backs in the game, and historically, Auburn's been at its best, right? When you're running that football, defensively, you have some veteran playmakers, but there are some questions up front along the offensive line. Demetrius Robertson will certainly help at receiver. There are some questions in terms of being able to rush the passer defensively. And I think when you're in the SEC West, if there is a transition, right, Brian Harsin coming in, does it take a year for everybody to get on the same page? Well, given your schedule, it's hard to maintain consistency week to week when you have a new staff, and you see that all over the country when new staffs come in. So to me, Alabama the clear favorite. I think Texas A&M may be the top contender over LSU, and the hardest team to get a feel for is Auburn. You have any disagreements there?
No, that's a full and thorough synopsis there of the SEC West. I'm surprised I don't disagree with you. I think Ole Miss is probably an interesting case. Maybe them and Auburn could flip-flop depending on what happens there at quarterback for both those teams. But I feel like there's kind of a top three. There's Alabama, then there's Texas A&M and LSU. Then that Ole Miss, maybe Arkansas, Auburn, like who beats each other head to head. I think Mississippi State, I think they just got a long way to get to where Mike Leach wants to get to. Obviously they're changing just the whole way they went about it, kind of running that air raid. And you need a different kind of skill set to do that week in and week out in the SEC. And again, I'm kind of interested to see what kind of true read you got on guys like Sam Pittman, like Leach, and others who came in, had no spring practice to speak of. You basically did fall practice in groups, right? If you think back, BJ, when we first started fall practice last year, they're like, hey, you can only work with certain groups, and then we're going to keep them separated. And we're going to make sure we get to Saturday without, 3/4 of the team getting a positive test. So you basically tried to install an offense in small groups with little on-field work time to get it done. So how much does that change the expectations of little to no prep and work under traditional settings to now you've had a full off season with a full spring workouts, and now obviously you're about to have a full fall where you can go through and really clean up all the problems that you had with your football team. I think Arkansas, Mississippi State, Missouri, those teams are going to be very interesting when we start looking deeper into their coach's tenure after they come in and have such a weird start to their tenures there in the SEC. But you can check out the SEC, all the West predictions there, southernpigskin.com. We encourage you to check that out. We're coming right back. We've got more to come. 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Three and out on this Tuesday afternoon. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett. Glad you are with us. I want to bring this up to you, BJ, because we love talking about athleticism here on the show. But is there something? And I saw this last night on TV. Christian, I'd be interested to get your thoughts. Also, is there anything that truly shows how good of an athlete you are than playing softball? We saw it last night. DK Metcalf striking out. We saw UFC fighters who could. I forget who it was who could barely swing the bat. Can't throw, it's amazing. Like you think it's like a skill set, like, oh, you could throw a ball and you could swing a bat, but they can't do it.
I'm not going to say it. Nothing else shows how athletic you are more than playing softball, but I will say that softball can absolutely humble you. If you haven't played in a while and somebody knows how to throw something more than just what do they call the big lob throws? Like if they know how to actually
pitch,
if they know how to throw a softball, like there's a couple people out there whipping it, then you don't stand a chance. So, yeah, I'm not going to say it is the pinnacle of athleticism, but it'll definitely humble you.
I'm just saying, if you're DK Metcalf, should you be getting struck out by Quavo in slow pitch softball?
Yeah, if you don't do it a lot.
Hitting is so hard. Hitting is so hard. And I know people will say, oh, it's slow pitch softball. Man, when I played church league softball, if I hit it and made contact and it went 8 feet, that was a success. And then I would try to run to first base. Hitting is so hard. You just don't want to strike out. I struck out a couple of times. But no, I agree with Christian. It'll humble you because you're thinking, okay, I'm about to put this in play. I'm going to, nice and easy, kind of natural swing. Nope. You're going to swing and miss. You're going to strike out. And to me, it is incredibly hard.
Kevin, you're a professional baseball coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
When it comes to the swings, do you see home runs more so when someone's swinging out of their shoes, or when you just put a good natural swing?
No, when you just put a good natural swing on it. I'm just saying, you see professional athletes. I watched last night, and I forget who it was, the guy who was a UFC fighter. He's a good UFC fighter. Your job is body balance and muscles. You can't swing the bat, and you can't throw.
It's hand-eye coordination, which you're DK Metcalf can literally get bodied by a cornerback and have to get off of him to get into his route, get open 50 yards away. Russell Wilson throws a ball that he has to echolocate somewhere above him.
I get that.
In the heavens.
But a ball that's lobbed to you can't hit it.
Then he can jump, spin, catch with one hand, get assaulted by another human being, land on his feet and run into the end zone. And he could do all that. But he can't locate a 6-7 inch in diameter ball,
moving it 10 miles an hour.
Yeah, because you think you're going to have it. You think you're going to have it. Then you swing and miss at the first pitch, and then your confidence is over. It's over.
You kind of break your back because you swing so hard your ribs hurt.
Yeah. Quick poll: would you participate in the celebrity softball contest, or would you be more afraid of striking out?
Oh, I'm going yard. No question.
You're not going.
I would strike out.
I'm going yard. Let's go. Well, after the show, Kevin, we'll go to the ballpark. I'm taking you deep.
We'll see about that.
I already did a wiffle ball.
Oh, wiffle ball. That's the end all be all. Okay. We've got more to come in hour number 2, 3 and out. Rich Styles, host of the Back Nine Boys Golf Show, will join us. We're talking the Open Championship. Mark Bradley, bold predictions for the upcoming college football
Open Championship
season. He will join us at hour 2 as well. It's 3 and out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you here, 3 and Out, on this Tuesday, all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett here with you. Hour number 2, we'll hear from Rich Stiles, host of the Back Nine Boys Golf Show, the Open Championship coming up this weekend, and also Mark Bradley, AJC.com, will join us. We will talk about his bold predictions for the college football season upcoming, and he's got a few of them. We'll talk to him about that here in about 30 minutes on 3 and Out. But first, let's take 3 here on this Tuesday. There we go. All right, Southern, you are with us. You are going to read us the Take 3 questions today. So BJ and I are ready to go. Lay it on us. What you have for us here for Take 3.
All right, guys. So, Take 3. Your dad is an all-star baseball player. Are you allowed to have a favorite baseball player beside him?
Of
yes,
course.
Yeah. I kind of think you have to, right? Because your dad is one of the best, right? He's a reigning MVP, but he's also your dad. You get to see him every day, and you know his game, and you've seen all the highlights, right? So you talk about you have respect for your dad. You know your dad is a great player, but you want to meet one of the other stars, right? Wasn't Freddie Freeman's son Charlie wanting to meet Fernando Tatis, right?
Yeah, you got to see Tatis. Yeah, to Charlie Freeman, Freddie Freeman is that guy that won't let him stay up past 9:30. Like that's who.
That's
Freddie
true.
Freeman, right? It's like he's the one that like when he calls me when he's not doing baseball, like go to bed. All right, I appreciate Dad plays baseball for a living. I want to see Tatis and Ohtani. That's fine. That's fine. It doesn't matter. I mean, you get to see Dad all the time. Dad can still be the hero, but he wants to see Tatis and Ohtani. Perfectly fine.
And he got the picture, right? I saw the picture on Twitter. So that's awesome.
All right, guys. I got to agree with you. I mean, cute little Charlie. It's okay if he has another baseball player to look up
Yeah, exactly.
to. All right, Take 2. Happy birthday, Harrison Ford. What is your favorite Harrison Ford movie?
All right, I was talking with Kevin about this in the show meeting because to me, you think about Harrison Ford, you think about Han Solo. It's Star Wars, and I don't know if I'm allowed. I know sometimes y'all don't like my answer. I don't know if I'm allowed to say just Star Wars because you think about Han Solo. I know there's been 10 different movies, 12 different movies, whatever. Do I have to narrow it down and pick one Star Wars, or can I just say Harrison Ford, Han Solo, Star Wars, because that covers the entire scope and scale of it? And right, he had his own movie, Solo, where
Was he in it?
Huh?
Was he still playing?
I'm just saying the character. The character is got his own, right? So what I'm saying is, I think it's Han Solo because when you think about Harrison Ford, I mean, for a while I thought Han Solo's a real person and it is Harrison Ford, but it's actually Han Solo. Like Han Solo is the character and the actor. So it's got to be Star Wars.
No Indiana Jones.
I haven't seen all those.
I mean, that's another one where I guess you could say Indiana Jones and you just run out the whole series. But was it Air Force One? I thought that was pretty awesome, Harrison Ford. But the Fugitive, to me, top notch for Harrison Ford. That was a great movie. Just action the whole time. Have you seen The Fugitive? I
A long time ago.
Okay. At least you've seen it. I'll take that as an
All
acceptable.
right, well, hold on. What? Because if I can't say the entire Star Wars kind of film history, what is your favorite Star Wars, Kevin? Which one?
I've said I've only seen the original 3. I've been very clear on that. So I can't say if I would like any of the new ones that I haven't seen.
And Christian hates that.
Return of the
He
Jedi,
hates-
I mean,
You've only seen 3. He hates that. That drives him crazy.
he wants to fight me over the fact that I have not seen more than 3 Star Wars movies. I'm sorry, that's just all I've seen.
I want to fight you for a lot of things, but that's not very high on the list.
Harrison. So BJ did a very BJ thing where he said Han Solo, Harrison Ford. That's like his favorite role. And
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, okay, but it's not like he's playing different. Like there's consistency in character. It's Han Solo in different circumstances, different stages, but it's still Han Solo. So what I'm saying, Harrison Ford is Han Solo. So that's it.
I think my favorite fun fact about Harrison Ford's career is that Alec Baldwin was supposed to be the Jack Ryan in all those like Clear and Present Danger movies, but Harrison Ford just kind of big timed out young Alec Baldwin out of the rest of those roles, because Alec Baldwin was Jack Ryan in the Hunt for Red October, and then if you notice, he kind of got big timed out of it by old Harrison Ford.
I'd said The Fugitive, man. I thought that's
a great movie.
Peak,
But like,
good Harrison Ford.
can it be your best role if you're not the best actor in that movie? Because I think Tommy Lee Jones is way better in that movie than Harrison Ford.
Sure, it can be. That's why they have supporting actor.
BJ and I were talking about this. Maybe the
support-
best line in movie history when Tommy Lee Jones looks at him and just goes, "I don't care." Like, just flawless performance.
What about
That's
the
the
Indiana
point.
Jones? I haven't seen all the Indiana Jones. Is that
Get off my
how do
plane.
you guys? Okay,
How have you guys not mentioned the Call of the Wild?
Didn't that just come out?
It came
That's
out, but in
recency bias,
COVID-19, so it came out in 2020. You had time to watch it. You have to go watch it. Great movie. All right, take
Call of the
3.
Wild. All right, I'm marking it down. I'll check it out.
National French Fry Day is today. What is the best form of the French fry?
all right. I like the battered fries, and I know Kevin and I disagree here, but you get the fries that are extra crispy, crunchy. They have all the batter. They're big. They're thick.
Okay, for this.
They fill you up. And listen, the best type of fries, a lot of fries. That's the best type of fries when you have a bunch. Okay. And I understand you like the curly fries, you
I
like
do,
the
yeah.
seasoned fries, and I respect that. I do respect that. I'm not here to turn away fries or talk down any fries, but what I'm saying is if I have a choice, I like the battered fries. They're unique, they're thick. Again, you can use them and kind of scoop up. You can get a big scoop of ketchup. I mean, you can do work with some battered fries, and they have kind of a different texture, a different feel. So they're original. They're kind of exclusive in terms of how they hit you. So I'm going to go with the battered fries.
Not a fan of those. Definitely, BJ gave my answer. I mean, it's the curly fries. And if I can't have that, the seasoned fries after that. I mean, the regular French fries that you can get in like a lot of
All
places.
right.
Like,
How do you feel about crinkle fries?
Do what?
How do you feel about crinkle fries?
I would rather. I mean, just honestly, I would rather have no crinkle. I want my potatoes. I want them ironed out. I want. I don't want any crinkles in them.
I don't know, man. I think my favorite might be, and some people say these aren't even really French fries, even though they are fried, but like the steak fries,
Those are good. Those are good.
where you cut the potatoes
Yeah.
into the wedges and
You
fry
got
them.
the skin still on it. Yeah,
So
yeah.
good. Sour cream on them, maybe some bacon.
It sounds more like a loaded baked potato working, but yeah, that's
But
fine.
it's a
I was about to say, with all the toppings, this is suddenly changing to a meal. This is becoming an entree.
You don't think French fries can be a meal?
I mean, they should be. All right, so are you with Kevin? Do you like the curly fries and do you like the battered fries?
I think I like less, I guess, batter on them than anything. I think I like my fries naked.
Just dump them in the grease.
Yeah, you
and
cut that
bring 'em
potato,
out.
cut that potato up, drop it in the deep fryer. I'm good to go.
Yeah, curly fries are the way to go. I will take curly
You
fries.
get the hell
over-
out of here with baked fries. What is that?
Who does that?
Healthy people, I guess.
No, but is that a thing?
Yeah.
Where?
There's a lot of restaurants that do that, where they do the press with the fries. Which, look, listen, step one, they're amazing. You're like, that's great. You're just taking a potato through the press, and
Right.
it's all dividing into fries. You're doing a great job. But then they put the seasoning on it and put it in an oven. Nah, that's not a French fry. It's
What type
literally
of seasoning do you,
Is that
Kevin?
like
You've
a
always
chip?
been
It's
big on
in
the
the name.
seasoning. You've always been big on the seasoning. What seasoning do you like?
Me? If you got a little garlic Parmesan seasoning on there, that's good. I like it. Garlic fries, they're good. But
What about the sweet potato fries? You get the sweet
I
Oh,
was
potato.
just about
What?
to say that.
What? They're good. They're
I
delicious.
love sweet
That's
potatoes.
not a
I can't.
French fry,
I can't take sweet potato
That's a
fries.
yam.
No, I
It's got
can't
to
do
be
it.
a potato.
What is it?
Sweet potato fries are the best
But
thing.
aren't I
known
might be
to man.
stupid here, but isn't a sweet potato a yam?
I think they're.
I
different.
mean, basically, yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. Yeah.
They're all spuds.
It has the word potato in it.
It does. That's where this is a
I
gray
don't-
area, or in this case,
I
kind
don't
of an
think a sweet
orange
potato
area.
is actually
but-
a potato, though.
Yams and sweet potatoes are not the same. Yams have rough, dark brown skin, comparable to tree bark, while sweet potatoes have smooth, reddish skin and they're softer and have a sweeter flavor.
I may be an idiot. That's fine.
Okay, well, hey, you learn something new every day on the show. Apparently,
I was about to
yams.
say, we're getting the breakdown. Is a sweet potato a vegetable?
Yeah, Southern did that off the top of her dome too. She didn't look up anything.
She knows the nutritional content of sweet potatoes versus yams.
Is a sweet potato a vegetable?
Yes.
No, it's a spud.
What's the
Potatoes
thing?
are a vegetable.
I don't
It's a
think a
spud.
spud is a food group. Hey, I got my grains,
Spankies
I
would love
got
to
my
think that they're
fruits.
fried
No,
spuds.
I actually think,
And I got my
we've had
spuds.
I actually think we've had this conversation before. It's a root, but I think it's
A
technically
root vegetable.
a root vegetable,
Still a vegetable.
which is lame. It's something.
So eat your vegetables. Sure, let me get some French fries.
Sweet potato fries. Yeah.
1,000%. There are some restaurants I had never experienced this before I moved to South Georgia that do fried vegetables.
Yeah.
Never experienced that before. Like, you want some broccoli? Oh, here you go, in the batter, fried. Enjoy.
I only knew okra is fried, but have you ever had non-fried okra?
Yeah, I love okra.
It's so good.
Yeah, okra's amazing in any form. I don't think Kevin's eaten anything green
That's
except
not
for
true.
except for mint chocolate chip ice cream
That's
in
not true.
about 25
Yeah,
years.
green beans are fine.
What'd you have? Like the Shamrock Shake, and that was the last green thing you had.
Sure. Yeah. Why not? We're gonna do that.
Do you even do lettuce on your burgers?
Shout out to fried okra.
I have lettuce on the tacos.
Yeah,
But no,
fried
not on
okra is one
burger.
of those things I eat by the handful. Like, it's not one at a time. You just kind of scoop and shove in your face.
You get them in the mashed potatoes with the gravy, and you
Oh,
just
baby.
you mix them together. Yes.
No.
Say that again, but slower.
I can't do that. Can't do that. I feel like this is just set up for like a later segment in this week. It's gonna be like, let's talk about vegetables, Kevin.
And how you don't eat them.
Yeah, let's take 3. We'll come back. Rich Styles, host of the Back Nine Boys Golf Show, will join us. The Open Championship is coming up this weekend. We'll talk about it next here on 3 and Out Southern Pigskin Radio Network. It is 3 and Out on this Tuesday. Glad you are with us all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. We are efforting Rich Styles, host of the Back Nine Boys Golf Show, the Open Championship coming up this weekend. And again, kind of interesting in some of the players who are not going to the Open Championship due to travel and some of the things out there as well. We'll talk to our next guest about that. You can hear him Saturday and Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. Rich Styles, host of the Back Nine Boys Golf Show, joins us. Rich, welcome. How are you? And it is the Open Championship this week. I understand, if you call it the British Open, depending on who you're talking to, that might warrant you a hearty slap across the nose.
Yeah, it is now called the Open. For years, it was the British Open. But now, if you are in the golf world or know anything about it, or even want to be within some kind of a circle and not be square, it is the Open. And everybody is now learning that it is the Open, and it's the 149th Open, and it is. This is one of the favorite times, I think, for a lot of people, because they can get up, have their coffee, and you got live golf and a championship and a major that you can watch in your pajamas in the morning.
And Rich, you're talking about links golf here. What is that exactly, and what makes it different and unique?
Well, you don't have a lot of trees. You don't have, a lot of the other things that we have. You have very deep bunkers. You have very high rough. You have waste areas that have things that you really would rather not hit out of. Links is just straight. It's just up and back. And if anybody has ever played in Scotland, Ireland, England, it's just a whole different way to play golf. There are many golf courses in the U.S. that are like that, and it's going to be interesting to see. But there could be wind, there could be rain, but links is very different. You have a lot of undulation in the fairways, a lot of undulation on the greens, and getting an even lie is going to be extremely rare on those kind of golf courses.
Rich Styles joining us here on 3 and Out. And Rich, you look at the Open this week. We've had a lot of guys not go. I think even Zach Johnson not going due to a COVID test. But why are we seeing so many guys either out or maybe choose not to go this week?
Well, I think part of it is because what they have to go through to get there. What I heard, I was talking with Harris English's coach the other day, and he told me that there is a 6-hour delay in London to get through customs. And part of it is, I think some of the guys that chose not to go just didn't want to go through that, or they went a day or two earlier than they would have gone. So there's still a lot of issues as far as COVID and the protocols that everybody has and the procedures over in Europe that we are not experiencing here. So travel here is much easier, and over there it is much, much harder. It's a shame that Zach got over there and found out that he had the virus, and so now he's got to quarantine and either come home and quarantine or stay there. So it's just a shame that it happened. But I don't know if these golfers are vaccinated. That's a big question I have is, these guys that are getting it, were they vaccinated? Have they gotten one shot? Have they gotten any of the shots? But, that's a whole other matter. But it is a shame that Zach had to pull out since he won it in 2015.
And Rich, when you look ahead to the start of the tournament, I mean, this style you've talked about, the circumstances over there with the links golf, what type of player benefits from that? Who are some golfers that maybe we need to keep an eye on as this tournament starts?
Well, I think you've got to look at a lot of the Europeans. They're used to that. That's how they've played. That's how they've grown up. But it also, doesn't take out of account, guys like Jordan Spieth, who's won over there in 2017. Brooks Koepka has not won over there, but he's an extremely efficient ball striker, and he has a lot of confidence. Rory has an opportunity. Jon Rahm. John's got to be probably your favorite because of the way that he's playing and the balance that he now has, that he calls in his life, that has settled him down, working with his life coach, and now having a baby, and his wife, and it's really just settled him down and controlled his temper. And those are the kind of guys that you have to look at. Justin Thomas could be another guy that would play well there, but you've got to be able to play under the conditions and understand links golf. That's probably why a lot of these guys go over there a little bit early and maybe play 9, 18, maybe a little bit more than they would on some other courses, just to get used to the conditions of the greens and all the undulation and the deep sand traps that you have to work through.
Rich, I know obviously when you talk about just the unique circumstances, we've talked a lot about Bryson when it comes to majors, because he's been out there trying to, moneyball the majors, basically, and see how he can work. Can you really do that with link style course? I know you really can't overpower the course, because one bad bounce and all your power kind of goes by the wayside because you're in a bunker that's 6 feet deep.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, Bryson's going to try and overpower everything, but I don't think Bryson's going to have a very good Open. I could be wrong. It's just, my thoughts lately about his driving. He's still trying to hit it extremely far and hard, and he's missing fairways. And if you miss fairways on a links course, you're in trouble. It is definitely those that that hit the ball straight and hit the greens and are able to get out sometimes with a par, or luckily a birdie at times. The bounces are going to be critical. I mean, you could hit a great drive and all of a sudden, it hits the side on the right or the left, and it bounces into something that you really don't want to be in. So, links is very different. It's more target. It's more penalty. It's more of an issue if you don't stay in the fairway, and you can stay away from the trouble, which are the sand traps. I mean, sometimes those traps, as you say, are 6 feet, and some are even deeper than that, and they're very hard to get out of.
We're still seeing headlines with Bryson DeChambeau and Brooks Koepka, obviously. What's the latest on that rivalry?
Well, I happened to watch the press conference with Brooks this morning, and it was interesting. He said, he and Bryson had some kind of a disagreement at a tournament a year or two ago, and Bryson did hold up to what he told Brooks that he was going to do, and that's where the issue is. What it is, it's never really been said, but Brooks did say, even though we're going to be on the same team for the Ryder Cup, I guarantee you we're not going to be playing together. And one of the media asked him, what happens if you and Bryson are in the final two at the Open? And he goes, I would love it. And that just shows you the kind of competitiveness and where he would like to be as far as with him and Bryson. They do not get along. They're not going to go to dinner together. They're not going to sit down and have a cigar and talk about, hey, how did you play today? How's your family? How's your life? That's just probably not going to happen.
Let's hope they get paired together at some point this week. That would be great. Great television, great theater. Rich Stiles, host of the Back Nine Boys Golf Show, our guest Saturday and Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. Rich, always a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Cheerio, gentlemen.
Rich Stiles, our guest, joining us. We'll come back. We will chat with Mark Bradley, AJC.com. He made some bold predictions for the upcoming college football season. We'll let him explain those when we return. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network.
Much like DJ Shockley stepping in for David Green, Christian Gokel stepping in for Kevin Thomas for this segment. Kevin had to step away for a moment. He will be back here in a little bit, but really excited to talk to our next guest here, good friend of the show. You can follow all of his work on AJC.com. From the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Mark Bradley joining us here on 3 and Out. Mark, how are you, sir?
Good, thanks.
You have been covering obviously everything, Hawks, Falcons, Braves, a lot of huge news, but starting to dive into the college football season. And you put out your pigskin picking a little bit earlier, and there's some pretty bold assertions in there. One of them, straight off the top, Georgia winning the national championship. You're familiar with the sports landscape in this state, man. So when you say that, you know you're going to get a lot of people riled up.
Yeah, but I also know that over 37 years, I've gotten a lot of people riled up about just about everything. So I've developed a little bit of a thick skin over the past 4 decades.
Mark, in your mind, when you look at this Georgia team, picking them to win the national championship, what's going to be the biggest difference between this team and maybe some of the teams in the past that have been close but weren't quite able to win that title?
Well, I don't know that the teams that have been ahead of them, mostly talking about Alabama, are going to be as good as Alabama was last year. And if you remember, Georgia, even with Stetson Bennett at quarterback, led that game at halftime in Tuscaloosa. So, if JT Daniels is Georgia's quarterback in that game, does Georgia win? Do they win the East instead of Florida? Maybe. So, but I think the fact that Georgia has a returning quarterback of pretty high caliber sets it up pretty well. Especially in a league where most of the big name quarterbacks are gone. Mac Jones is gone. Florida lost its guy, and Texas A&M lost Kellen Mond. So I think that Georgia is in pretty good shape.
I think one of the biggest factors when you talk about Alabama and why in your column you believe Georgia's better is the fact that most people just seem to think that Alabama is going to reload, right? They never rebuild, they reload. But inside your column, you say there's no way they don't take a step back.
I think that even I think when Saban went after they beat Georgia in the national championship game when Tua threw the pass to Devontae Smith, Saban said himself he thought that might have been their best recruiting class ever. Well, now that class is finally gone. Tua left after 2 years, and now the most of the other big names are gone too. And plus you can't win every year. I mean, Alabama doesn't win every year as good as it is. LSU got ahead of them the year before last. I think that Georgia. I think that really about all you can do if you're in a Georgia position of Georgia is put yourself in position, keep putting yourself in position to be one of the best teams in the country, and and hope that some year it'll break your way. And it almost did in 2017. And I think that this year it sets up pretty well. If Georgia wins its first game of Clemson, it's going to be favored in the rest of the regular season games, and it and if it does beat Clemson in Charlotte, then it could well be that Georgia's number 2 or number 1 in the country by October or so.
And Mark, I wanted to ask you about that opener. You obviously have Clemson picked to win the ACC. Is that a game in your mind? If Georgia's going to win the national championship, they have to win, or could you foresee a situation where they lose that game but find a way to bounce back and win out en route to a national title?
Yeah, I don't think they have to win it. I think it would be really nice to win it. I think that. I think that's the kind of game Georgia needs to win, and the Clemson obviously is no longer has Trevor Lawrence or Travis Etienne, and those are big guys too. I mean, I know that Alabama and Clemson recruit great every year, and that they do pretty much go on about as well replacing great players as any program, and they do it better than anybody in the country. But still, you can't lose like maybe the best player in school history in Travis Lawrence, and not feel some effect. I also think the other thing is, Georgia wasn't that far away, hasn't been that far away in any of the last 4 years, and last year was a year where Georgia had a difficult time finding a quarterback, but still, it ended up losing 2 games, and the 2 games it lost were to Alabama and to Florida, and I think that if Georgia and Florida had played a month later, Georgia would have won that game. But I don't see Florida stepping in Georgia's way this year and keeping them out of the SEC title game the way the Gators did last year.
Catching up with Mark Bradley from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And Mark, obviously the SEC East, at least in my mind, is going to come down to that game in Jacksonville. On the flip side of it, you think that the game to decide the SEC West is going to be played at Kyle Field when Alabama heads out to take on Texas A&M. You actually have the Aggies going on to win the SEC West. What is it about Jimbo Fisher's team this year that you think gets them over the hump?
I think that Jimbo's team is did I have Texas A&M winning? I don't think I did. I think I said the temptation was great, but I was going to resist that temptation.
See, that might have been what got me.
Okay, all right. No, I think Alabama will win the West.
All right.
Or maybe I just lost my mind and forgot what I wrote. But I think that I think losing Kellen Mond is a big deal. I also think that Texas A&M lost to Alabama by quite a margin last year, and it won the rest of its games, but it wasn't like it was blowing people out in those games. And I think that Jimbo has done a really good job. I think he's a really good coach. I just don't know that I don't know if it's quite ready to take that step, which is a pretty huge step to get ahead of Alabama in the West.
I apologize. You did resist the temptation. You said it was palpable.
I'm sorry.
But you did resist the temptation. I apologize. I got excited when I started reading that.
Well, I got excited here for a minute too. Yeah. So, no, I think Texas A&M will be the third best team in the SEC, but I think it probably was about a year ago too. So, I think they're really good, and I think at some point they're probably going to be the next team to get ahead of Alabama in the West. I mean, Auburn has done it a couple of times, and LSU did it with Joe Burrow. But I'm not sure Texas A&M is ready to do it just this year.
Mark, how do you evaluate Georgia Tech right now, a program that obviously had to transition from the Paul Johnson era where they had success, but when you move on from that offense, there was going to be, a little bit of a transition, which we've seen. Are they capable of making a bowl game this year with a very difficult schedule?
I think they're capable. I think there are just 4 very tough games on their schedule. They have North Carolina and Clemson early, and they have Notre Dame and Georgia late, and though that's tough. It's hard to know just because Georgia Tech wasn't a terrible team even at the end under Paul Johnson. I mean they still ran his offense and were a competitive team. But I think they went 5-6 in his last year. But I think that it what people realize and is that it's very difficult to recruit to stock a team that didn't have tight ends or that didn't have much use for passing quarterbacks, and you have to. Basically, if you're Jeff Collins, you basically have to reset the whole thing. And, I don't think the results yet have been overly impressive. I mean, they won 3 games the first year and 3 games the second year. But I also think that this was one that was going to be a tough reset. and I think that I think that this is about the time that if they're going to get kind of competitive, this is about the year that they should be doing it. And I'm just not sure the schedule is gonna line up in their favor.
Well, Mark, I wanted to ask you with Georgia Tech. I fear that Jeff Collins is going to run into the same thing that Dan Quinn ran into, which is if you win, all the slogans and T-shirts and hashtags, everybody's about it, right? Everybody's hashtag 404 the culture or for the brotherhood for the Falcons, right? If you're winning, you're all about it. But how much more leeway does 404 the culture have if it's not resulting in wins on the field?
Well, I don't get. I know that the slogans and stuff with Collins can rankle some people. I think we have to remember that he's basically selling his program to high school seniors and people that are going to come play for Georgia Tech. He's not necessarily talking to a Tech alumni, and I think that he's going to need players, and he has recruited at a better level than Johnson, certainly, which wouldn't be hard. But I think that he realizes that the only way up and out of what he inherited is to get better players across the board, and I think he's gradually doing that. But it's just again, it's a process, and there's no guarantee. And certainly the fact that last year was a COVID year, and pretty much cut down all recruiting except via Zoom, certainly didn't make recruiting any easier.
Obviously, the two programs are in different places right now with Georgia and Georgia Tech. But when you talk about pressure, is there a certain element of pressure for Kirby Smart to, I guess, win that national championship? And then with Georgia Tech, is there pressure that you kind of alluded to perhaps to maybe start winning some games at those two respective programs?
Yeah, there's pressure in college football for every team every year. And I think that really, if you're Georgia and Smart, the only thing left to do is win the national championship. You won the SEC, you won a playoff game, you won the SEC East, but you haven't won the national championship, and that's the one that Georgia people really, really want. And I think that at some point it'll happen. I think he's put together a good enough program, and I think he's a good enough coach for that to happen. Tech, it's just. You can't, at some point people have to see some signs of definite signs of progress. And I'm not sure that Tech fans have gotten those yet with the 6 wins over 2 seasons.
And Mark, finally here, you mentioned inside of your column, your 4 playoff teams, Georgia, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ohio State there, and you have Spencer Rattler winning the Heisman Trophy. Just curious on your thoughts on those.
Those are pretty obvious names. I mean, the playoffs, there aren't many teams from nowhere that make the playoff, at least in its 14 manifestation. I mean, Clemson's been in it many years in a row, Alabama, and then of course Notre Dame has been there too. Oklahoma's been there several times. There are really only about, I think, 6 or 7 or 8 teams that you even need to consider when you're talking about the playoff, and those seem like pretty solid ones this year to me.
Well, hey, by 2023, you're going to have to add 8 more teams to that list.
Oh, yeah. Well, I may not be around writing. Well, I may not have to, but we'll see.
Well, we sure hope you are. Again, Mark Bradley from the AJC.com. You can check out all of his work there. Mark, always appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Again, BJ, you said it there. You can pretty much guarantee 6 or 7 teams, 4 of them are going to make it into the college football playoff there. We've talked about Coastal Carolina and their chances kind of diminishing based off of a really weak strength of schedule there. But I think he said something that not a ton of people are saying right now. 2 SEC teams, in his opinion, make it to the college football playoff.
Well, and yeah, picking Georgia to win the national title. And I think on paper, this is a team that looks the part. You have talent, you have experience, you have depth, you have a schedule where there are opportunities and springboards, but it's not so difficult that you're going to play your way out of title contention. So there is great optimism around the Bulldogs right now. Again, Mark Bradley picking the Dogs to win the national championship, and I think people expect to see Georgia at least get close. I think the expectation is make the college football playoff. Now, you're probably going to have to beat one of Clemson or Alabama potentially to do that, but this is a program that, as Mark said, has done just about everything else you can do. The next standard is not only competing for a national championship, but finding a way to win that national title as well.
Man, I hate to be this guy, but if you're a Georgia fan, the one time you've made it to the national championship, you didn't have to play Alabama en route to the national championship. If you're a Georgia fan, are you pulling for Texas A&M big time when they play Alabama?
Well, of course. And listen, if you win a national title, I don't think people are going to go back and go, well, wait a second, you didn't play this team.
Bama.
And no, people will remember the national title. Now, again, there could be a scenario where you don't play them in Atlanta, but you have to play them in the Final Four. But yeah, you're absolutely rooting for that. Absolutely.
There you go. Kevin Thomas will be back when we come back on 3 and Out.
Great to be here with you on this Tuesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben coming up in the final hour. We'll talk with Will Vanderhort of the ClemsonInsider.com. Georgia Clemson, of course, starting off the year right there, week one in college football. Looking forward to that as well. And what would a win in week one mean for some coaches out there in college football? We'll get to that coming up next hour as well. But we are at the All-Star break. BJ, maybe a little out of time. Christian will have to forgive me about it, but we'll get to building the ultimate Braves team tomorrow post All-Star break. But new rules apparently potentially at the end of the season. Rob Manfred saying today, after this season, likely dropping the 7-inning doubleheader, and nobody is going to get a free runner on second to start extra innings as early as starting after this season. Yeah, great.
Yeah. That's good news. That has been really hard to get used to, right? Extra innings. Oh, you automatically have a runner on second, and the implication there, which we've seen happen, is you can win a game without getting a hit. And I understand the value of station-to-station baseball and kind of doing what you have to do, but it seems strange to just arbitrarily say, all right, you go into extra innings, we're going to start it out with a runner on second, and if you can advance the runner to third with a ground out or a bunt or whatever, you're talking about a pop fly to center field, and you potentially win the game. I just thought it feels fake. It feels created, kind of made up out of thin air, and it's been strange to watch. It's been strange to get used to, and it doesn't feel like the traditional sort of you have to find a way to make it happen mindset that you have in extra innings that make extra innings so tough, right? You've already played 9 innings. Now you got to figure out a way to grind out a run. It just seems like you're trying to do something that isn't necessary. I'm glad that's going away.
Okay, worst rule, starting a runner on second base in extra innings, or college football, just putting the ball on the 25 for overtime?
I mean, I'm okay with that. I think putting the runner on second base is just I don't get it. It feels completely out of place. So that's a worse rule to me.
Yeah, college football, I just hate it that you're basically just saying, hey, we are at least going to give you 3 points without you doing anything. Like, not even going to have to work.
Well, there are some occasions where teams didn't score in overtime, so I don't think you're just handing out 3 points.
But I'd like your offense to at least have to do some work to try to put points on the board in college football overtime. I know they're trying to get the game over as part of it, but come on, man, at least make like it's totally against the defense. Hey, you literally could have 3 great plays. It doesn't matter. They're going to at least kick a field goal, even if you do perfect and they don't get an inch there in overtime. We've got more to come here on 3 and Out, final hour around the corner. Will Vanderhort will join us. We'll talk Georgia and Clemson. Also, what would the win mean in week one? Did I totally butcher his last name? Will Vanderhort will join us. Final hour. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. It's 3 and Out here on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin BJ here with you, the final hour of the show. We'll hear from Will Vanderhort. Got that in there for you, Christian. The ClemsonInsider.com. He'll join us coming up in about 15 minutes. We'll talk Georgia and Clemson opening week of college football. But speaking of the opening week, BJ, you have Georgia, Clemson, some big games out there. What would a week 1 win mean for some of the following coaches? Obviously, Kirby Smart there at Georgia if they bump off Clemson.
I think it'd come with even more validation. I mean, I think this summer, this preseason, the expectations are about as high as I remember for a Georgia football team. And this is not the first time that Georgia's been picked as one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the summer, and they've been close just about every year. But I think in the past, the talking points were largely Georgia can compete for a national championship, but although if, that would be kind of the start of the rest of the sentence. Now I think most people are just saying Georgia can compete for a national championship. And when you start to look at strengths and weaknesses on this team, there are a lot of strengths and it's hard to find many weaknesses. And, we've heard from Mark Bradley and others, countless others, saying the next step, the next milestone for Georgia is a national championship. And what's interesting is, if you beat Clemson, there'll be this kind of exclamation point to your first game if you're Kirby Smart, if you're Georgia, but then you still have the rest of the regular season in the SEC, a likely matchup with Alabama. So I think we would have to understand, as big as this win would be, it would not be the end of the story, obviously, for Georgia. It would be the start of the story. And you would feel like the momentum you would get from beating Clemson would give you great confidence heading into the rest of your SEC schedule. And I think the obvious benefit here would be if you lose this game and you were to go through the regular season unscathed, you probably, or not probably, you would be in regardless of what were to happen in the SEC championship game. So this one would buy you a loss somewhere later in the year if you needed one. It would come with great confidence, great affirmation. I think it would immediately make Georgia right up there, put Georgia right up there alongside Alabama as the early national championship favorite. And I think it would add to the hype and the intrigue and the excitement that is already around this program.
I think Kirby just needs that one, and that's one against Clemson. And if you get it, as you said, you are set up from week 1 throughout the remainder of the season. If you take care of your business, you're going to be in the national championship picture, BJ, so much so that potentially if you were to lose the SEC championship game, you might still be in the college football playoff. And
I think you would be in. I think you would be in if you go through the regular season unbeaten, and that's what I was getting at. If you beat Clemson, and I know some people say, hey, maybe Florida will only be a top 20 team. If you go through your schedule in the regular season and you beat Clemson and you beat Florida and you beat Auburn, and your only loss is in a quote-unquote bonus game, a conference championship loss to likely Alabama, but maybe A&M or LSU, you are in. You would be 12-1, ranked in the top 5 with one of the signature wins of the season, beating Clemson. I mean, there's no way Clemson, even if they lose this game, at most you're talking about 2 losses for the Tigers. You're most likely talking about them going undefeated the rest of the way. But yeah, this is a statement game. Now, I will disagree with you a little bit. You were saying this is the one. I don't think this is the one. I think people around the Georgia football program view this as part of the process. But I think much like Mark Bradley was talking about, this is a team, fair or unfair, that's expected to win the national championship, at the very least make the college football playoffs. So I think if Georgia were to beat Clemson and then, I don't know, lose to Florida and lose in the SEC championship game, or lose to Auburn and lose in the SEC championship game, I don't think you would have kind of that to point back to and say, but we beat Clemson. I think there would still be a great sense of disappointment, whether that's warranted or not. But I don't think this is the game. I think the game is much later in the year for the Dogs, but this is absolutely a showcase, no doubt about it.
All right, as we look at some other guys that a week 1 win could certainly boost them in a big way. What about Manny Diaz at Miami? They've got, obviously, Alabama early in the season, their week 1. How big would that be for the Miami is legit conversation if they can go out and get a win week 1?
It'd be a game changer. You immediately become one of the faces of the early college football season. And I think it would be just monumental in terms of, we know that Miami's been good. They've been really good in recent years, but you beat Alabama. I don't care if it's in January or in August, you beat Alabama, you're front page news. And I think Miami immediately becomes one of the teams that everybody's talking about in college football. And I would imagine if you beat Miami, or if you're Miami and you beat Alabama, De'Aaron King had a huge game. He's probably one of the early Heisman Trophy front runners. And at that point, you're looking at Miami's schedule going, I know they have North Carolina, but this team just beat Alabama. Is Miami looking at a clash with Clemson in the ACC championship game where a college football playoff bid could be on the line? I mean, it would be massive for the U. It would be massive for the ACC, but I think it would help further kind of move Miami back to that national forefront. And again, we've seen Miami be good. We've seen them be 8-2, 9-2, be in the top 10 late in the season. But even being in the top 10 late in the season isn't the same as beating Alabama. And I don't know how many times Miami's beaten the number one team in the country. Alabama's going to be number one in the country in this game, even at a program where history has been made time and time again. And there are countless milestones. I think Miami is one of the most storied, accomplished programs in the history of college football. Even at a place like that, you beat Alabama, it changes things. It changes the perception of the program. It changes recruiting. It changes the energy around the team. It changes expectations. And then on the other side, if Miami beats Alabama and Alabama's 0-1, I mean, I still think there'll be a lot of people going, all right, now they're going to win, 12 games in a row. But do you look at Alabama and go, maybe that step back that some people were talking about, maybe it's a reality. And you look at a schedule and you see A&M and you see Auburn and you see LSU. And maybe you're looking around going, maybe they're not the favorite to win the SEC West. And that would be a game changer in its own right, just in terms of sort of reassessing expectations for Alabama. But yes, this would be massive if Miami could win that game.
Yeah, I think Manny Diaz, obviously, when you're talking about him as a coach coming into a program like Miami, that's a huge game changer for him. You look at Miami so many times. A couple of years ago, what against Florida? Oh, Miami, it's their chance. And Florida just road graded him. It wasn't even close. I think it's a big chance for Manny Diaz to kind of up his game there as well. One more to get to here, this segment, BJ. Coaches with big chances in week one. Mike Norvell. I know he came in at Florida State. A lot of people said, hey, maybe they were a little too quick to make that coaching switch. He comes in, obviously, in COVID, has this situation with his players, maybe not trusting what he's got to say. Now you come back, full off season, full season of recruiting, you get ready, and now you get, do I call him ex-ACC member of Notre Dame? Or like, what? I don't know how you say that. Former ACC member of Notre Dame, ACC member of Notre Dame, but one of the storied programs. I mean, if this is the mid-90s, this might be the game of the week in college football. But to me, this is about Mike Norvell showing that Florida State is going in a positive direction if you could beat Notre Dame in a big way.
And you'll have a lot of people watching. I believe this game is a Sunday night standalone game for college football. So you're talking about Florida State, Notre Dame in Tallahassee, and a lot of questions about Florida State. The last couple of years, more questions than answers. And this would not be a win that would be on the level of Miami beating Alabama. I think Miami beating Alabama would kind of change the dynamics of the early college football season, and we would probably see a ripple effect all the way through the entire year. But this would be a game that would a win that would be a statement for Florida State, because around the program, when you talk to pundits, when you read preseason predictions, a lot of people seem to think, yeah, maybe Florida State's a little better, but the schedule is just really tough. You got, Florida, you have North Carolina, you have Clemson, you have Miami, and you have that Notre Dame opener. And a lot of people are saying maybe 7-5, maybe 6-6, maybe 5-7. And maybe that season for Florida State where they get moving back in the right direction isn't until 2022. If you win this game, it changes that. If you beat Notre Dame at home on national television, and Notre Dame is still, like you said, one of the standard programs in college football, what they did last year, great success. If you beat Notre Dame, that's a game changer. And Florida State suddenly becomes part of the national conversation once again. And I don't think that would necessarily catapult Florida State, to some run towards the college football playoff, but it would help restore some national credibility. It would give Florida State some big picture momentum. And I think it would get people looking at Florida State as maybe a program that's closer to quote unquote being back. And I don't love that phraseology. When you talk about a Miami or a Florida State, their dynasty runs were amongst the greatest runs we've ever seen in college football. So I think that's a tough standard to say, hey, Miami, you're going to be, early 2000s Miami, or hey, Florida State, you're going to be late 90s Florida State. I think that's a tough barometer. But I do think if you win this game, it provides a new energy for Florida State, and I think it accelerates the rebuilding process, so to speak.
We got another minute here. Let's flip it around and say, obviously, there's great gains to be made. What about a loss? I don't know that it hurts Kirby Smart all that much, but certainly Manny Diaz, Mike Norvell, maybe the manner in how you lose might signal where you're really at as a program. How do you see it if it goes the other way for those guys?
No, I think that's fair. I think that's very well put. And Miami and Florida State are not programs that normally gauge themselves off of, oh, you played this team close. I mean, you're talking about teams that were dynasties not long ago. But I do think if you're Miami, you're playing Alabama. And I'm not saying Miami thinks this way. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying for us, if you're evaluating college football and Miami plays Alabama within a touchdown, that's the best quality loss you can have. I mean, that you come away from that game saying Miami didn't quite beat Alabama, but they have shown they're a top 10, top 15 team going back and forth with the defending champs, going back and forth with the top program in the country. And I think you can still gain some momentum and a lot of value from a game if you play Alabama close. Now, if you get blown out, I think that's a different story. And same thing for Florida State. I think most people realize Florida State is probably a couple of years away from getting back to contending in the ACC. And if you play Notre Dame at home and it's close and there are some big plays and you see some progress and maybe you lose to Notre Dame by 3 or 4 points, I think you look at that as, okay, Florida State just played a top 10 team. They played them within one score. Maybe when you look at the Seminoles in the ACC Atlantic, we know they're not better than Clemson, but maybe they could be right up there with NC State. They could be, better than a Boston College. They could be that second team potentially in the ACC Atlantic. I think you could take positives away from a close loss. Now, if you're Florida State and you play Notre Dame and you lose 34-10, I think that's a different situation where you're looking around going, okay, it's going to be a real struggle to make a bowl game. How are we expecting to get better here during the season? So I think how you lose matters, even for big time programs. Not that Miami thinks they're going to lose, not that Florida State thinks they're going to lose, not saying that, but I think how you play kind of beyond the totality of the final score will come with some value and will help kind of determine how the media views your program and the direction you may be going in.
I think that's certainly fair for those programs. Manny Diaz and Mike Norvell specifically. I think if Kirby Smart loses, it's just one of those, well, you're going to need to win pretty much out to keep yourself in that playoff race going into the SEC championship game. And that's really where the barometer is for Georgia right now, is SEC championship game and then playoffs and then championship. That's where you're trying to get at the end of the season. We got much more to get to here on 3 and Out. We'll come back. Will Vanderhort, the ClemsonInsider.com, will join us. We'll talk Georgia and Clemson next here on 3 and Out, Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Opening weekend of college football is going to give us Georgia and Clemson. A lot of folks really getting geared up for that there in Charlotte. And joining us here from the ClemsonInsider.com, Will Vanderhort joins us here on 3 and Out. Will, welcome to the show. How are you? Will, can you hear me? Will, are you there? Did we lose Will? I think we lost Will. So we will try to get Will back coming up here just a little bit. So
Yes, we will.
BJ, Georgia Clemson, obviously a huge showdown with JT Daniels, DJ Uiagalelei, two very good quarterbacks. I think now we have Will back with us. Will, can you hear us? Welcome to 3 and Out.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine, man. And then obviously Clemson Georgia rivalry game right out of the gate, and kind of the immediate showcase once again for DJ Uiagalelei. What are your kind of expectations here for Clemson opening up against obviously what at the very least will be a top 5 opponent?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. The last time everybody remembers seeing Clemson, right? You're only as good as your last game, right? And the last game Clemson played, they got hammered by Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl. And that's kind of left a sour taste in their mouth as a team. And it's sort of been their motivation to kind of this Georgia game is kind of they've looked at it like, hey, they got to go out there and show who they are. Because I feel like the last couple times they've been on the national stage, they haven't done as good a job of that. And that's something Coach Sweeney takes a lot of pride in is beating those big name teams such as Georgia and showing the rest of the world that Clemson football is one of the top programs in the country. And so this game has been circled, man. And Clemson Georgia, you don't need to circle it any other reason other than it's Clemson Georgia, right? Because these guys are 73 miles apart. It's a natural rivalry more than, Clemson fans will tell you. It's more of a natural rivalry to them than South Carolina is because it's a lot closer. And, they recruit against each other on a daily basis. And so, man, this is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it, in Charlotte. The only thing that sucks about this game is it's not in Athens or it's not in Death Valley. Nothing against Charlotte. I'm sure they'll do a good job putting it on. But, man, wouldn't it be great seeing these two guys playing in their home stadiums?
Obviously, no Trevor Lawrence, no Travis Etienne. Is the Clemson offense going to look any different, or are you going to see kind of the same style, the same schematic approach?
Well, if you're Georgia and you're smart, you go back and look at how Clemson played the quarterback position with Taj Boyd, because that's kind of, I think, the kind of offense you're going to see. A little more quarterback power, a more vertical passing game. DJ's strength is the long ball. Just go back and watch the Boston College and Notre Dame games, and you'll get good evidence of that. And he can run that quarterback power. I mean, guys, he's 6'5", 250 pounds. He's a Cam Newton type body, and he's probably a lot better passer than Cam Newton. I will say not probably, he is a better passer than Cam Newton, completing about 70% of his passes last year in those 2 games that he started for Trevor Lawrence. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a different look for Clemson offensively. You're going to see a lot of more quarterback power. I think you're going to see a lot more of the RPO game with DJ than they ran with Trevor Lawrence. So they're going to try to keep Georgia's defensive front on their heels because obviously that's the strength of that Georgia defense, and they really don't want to let those guys just be able to pin the ears back and come get them.
A follow-up to that is how much do they want to run with DJ Uiagalelei? You have a guy that's 250. Obviously, you would say, hey, the tendency is we want to use him as a battering ram, but you also want him to make it the totality of the season, not necessarily take too many unnecessary hits, even if he can take them. How much do they want to manage that load over the course of the season versus just, hey, we're going to use him and we're going to make him deal out some punishment?
Yeah, well, guys, we'll just say it like it is, right? I mean, after Georgia, let's just be honest, Clemson doesn't really play anybody that's going to really challenge them. So, that doesn't mean he can't get hurt or anything of that nature. But my point I'm making is I think you're going to see him throw more out at Georgia than they will anybody else until they get to maybe the AC championship game. Because it's one of those things, like if you remember a few years back when they played Ohio State, and they really hadn't run Trevor Lawrence at all the entire season, right? And then all of a sudden in the Fiesta Bowl, Trevor Lawrence all of a sudden became like the best quarterback / running back you ever saw at Clemson. They did the same thing with Deshaun Watson in the college football playoffs against Alabama and those guys back in the day. And so they kind of pick and choose when to run that quarterback stuff. And if I had to bet, they're going to probably run them a lot against Georgia, and then they're going to back off the rest of the season because they're probably going to feel like they're not going to have to run him against those other teams. So I think it's going to be like throw everything out at Georgia to try to get that win against Georgia because they understand that probably beating Georgia right now is more important than anything, any other game, in the sense that if they lose it, I don't know if they can make it to the college football playoff, even if they win the ACC, because Georgia's going to be their best win, and they may not play another ranked opponent until they get to the ACC championship game.
We've seen some incredible defensive lines at Clemson. Could this be one of those great groups with the guys coming back and the depth you have?
Yes, this defensive line can be nasty, guys. Clemson fans get mad at me because I've written several times during the spring and during the offseason that this defensive line can potentially be every bit as good when it's all said and done as that 2018 defensive line was, which is the one that had Cleveland Farrell, Christian Wilkins, Dexter Lawrence, and Austin Bryant. 3 of those guys went in the first 17 picks of the 2019 NFL draft. So, people are like, when I say that, they think I'm crazy. But when you look at it, Brian Brzee, I think he's a better Christian Wilkins and has a chance to be a better Christian Wilkins. Miles Murphy, I think, has a chance to be better than Cleveland Farrell. And then you got Xavier Thomas on the other side. He's a guy who, if he gets it all together and plays like he did as a freshman, he's going to be probably better than any player on that defensive line. I think he's a top 10 draft pick if he really puts it together this year. And then, you got KJ Henry and you got, Tyler Davis, who was a freshman All-American his freshman year and is a guy who I think can be as good as anybody up front. So they're just loaded, and they go about 3 deep at every position on that defensive line. And when I say 3 deep, I don't mean 3 deep with a couple of straggle guys behind them. They're like 3 deep with 4 and 5 star guys. And they've all played, and they're all very good. And that's what makes them so talented on the defensive line.
Will Vanderhort, the ClemsonInsider.com, joining us here on 3 and Out. Will, you recently put out a book, The Hidden History of Clemson Football. Tell us a little bit about that, and especially the hidden part.
Yeah, so obviously it's a history book on Clemson football going all the way back to its humble beginnings in 1896. And then the hidden part are the stories that some people may not know, like how Howard Rock actually began, the story behind it, or how they started running down the hill and when. Because some people get those days confused. They don't understand. They're not the same. And then, maybe, different stories about Coach Howard and stories about Danny Ford that they may not know about, and Dabo Sweeney and C.J. Spiller and all the great Clemson players that have come throughout the years. I got stories from the national championship seasons, all 3 of them. And so just different anecdotes, it's hard to tell it all. I tried to hit the stories that most Clemson fans think they know, but they probably don't know. And that was just so fun putting this thing together, because I think it educated a lot of Clemson fans on, what really is their history, and to make sure that that they understand what it is and the stories that have gone through the last 120 plus years.
Vanderhort, the Clemson Insider, our guest here on 3 and Out. Will, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Hey, guys, thanks for having me, and glad we were able to work it out and get me on.
Yes, sir. Will Vanderhort, our guest here on 3 and Out, and Clemson, Georgia, week 1. BJ, as he said, maybe the biggest regular season game Clemson has on their entire schedule.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think you're talking about a game that is going to be determined at the line of scrimmage. You heard Will say there, Clemson's going to try to get a push against Georgia's front. And I think that's where a lot is going to be determined. Can Georgia control the line of scrimmage? Can the Dogs pressure DJ Uiagalelei? Can they make Clemson one-dimensional? Or is Clemson able to keep Georgia off balance? I think a lot is going to be determined right there at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to that coming up the first week of college football there in Charlotte. This is 3 and Out, all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Welcome back. It's 3 and Out here on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett. Glad you are with us here on this Tuesday. The ACC, obviously, a lot of their hopes ride with Clemson, as we just talked about with Will Vanderhort, but southernpigskin.com. BJ, you've got the ACC Atlantic predictions. And much like we joked about with the West, with the SEC, I'm sure everybody at Southern Pigskin is just loving Clemson to finish first. And after that, I think it's where it gets very interesting there in the ACC Atlantic.
Yeah, it's clear that Clemson is the overwhelming favorite. I mean, you're talking about one of the most talented teams in the country. You're talking about a team where the expectation is to make the college football playoff, as they've done 7 years in a row. But DJ Uiagalelei is going to be a productive player. He's going to be a star. He's going to throw the ball downfield with great proficiency. You're going to see Clemson overwhelm people with its defense. This defensive line is incredible. Miles Murphy coming off the edge, Brian Bresee on the inside. This defensive line is the best in the country. And not only does Clemson have a dominant defensive line, its second team could probably be one of the best in the country. So Clemson is going to overwhelm people at the point of attack, but expect big things from Uiagalelei, especially when you look at him throwing the ball to Justin Ross on the outside. Justin Ross is one of the top perimeter playmakers in the country. So yes, Clemson is the clear number one. There's no other pick. I mean, it has to be Clemson, and they've earned that benefit of the doubt. I mean, they've been a lock for the college football playoff, Kevin, and they've really just been a mismatch for most of the teams in the ACC.
So who's your number two? When you look at it, is there anybody that we talked about? Can anybody challenge Alabama? Can anybody challenge Clemson in the ACC Atlantic right now? And if it's not close, who's at least the closest?
Yeah, I think on the right day, maybe. And to me, the second best team is NC State. I really like this NC State team. They have a lot of local guys on the roster, by the way. But this NC State team has balance, has depth, has experience, has a lot of talent. I think Devin Leary being healthy at quarterback, that's going to be a productive thing for them. You look at the offense, you have wide receivers that are big-time producers. You have Bam Knight back at running back. He's one of the top backs in the country. And then defensively, you look at Peyton Wilson and Isaiah Moore, two of the top linebackers in the country. This is a really good team, and you saw stretches of them play up to their potential last year. And I think this season, you look at NC State as a preseason top 25 team. I think they deserve to be nationally ranked. And can they beat Clemson? I mean, that's a heck of a standard. That's a big time question to ask. I think on the right day, that's a team that could potentially play with anybody. But to me, NC State is the number two in the ACC Atlantic. And Kevin, I also like Boston College. I think Boston College has a really good team. Jeff Hafley did a nice job a year ago. You're talking about a team that has one of the best offensive lines in the country. Love that offensive front with Alec Lindstrom and Zion Johnson, a couple of All-American candidates up front. Phil Jerkovic is a very good quarterback. Zay Flowers, one of the top receivers in the country. Jaden Lars Woodby should be a big-time playmaker for them in the defensive backfield. So after Clemson, to me, if you're looking for a tier two, I think it's NC State and Boston College in the Atlantic, and I would probably say NC State is the top challenger at this point.
Do Boston College, NC State, your estimation? This is one of the big things we talk about with the ACC is, do they have kind of staying power? And by staying power, I mean, can they be a top 25 program and stick around and not just be a 1 or 2 week flash in the pan and fall out of there?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's staying power, and I look at NC State, and again, I think it's a roster with really good balance. There aren't overwhelming weaknesses where you look and say, okay, this is going to cost you. You have good players, you have experience just about everywhere. And then with Boston College, I really like the offensive line play. Whether you're playing in the cold weather up north or whether you're playing on the road, that offensive line, that offensive front is going to be there for you every single week. And I think you have playmakers. Again, Zay Flowers out wide gives you that explosive dynamic ability. So yes, I think both of those teams, you could see them in the top 25 for a good portion of this year.
All right. Then the rest of the division, you have some teams that are, have some tradition. Florida State trying to get back to good. Louisville is a team that, trying to get back to the Lamar Jackson era. I mean, where are those teams in terms of relevance in the ACC Atlantic right now?
Yeah, I think it's tough to separate Florida State, Wake Forest, and Louisville. I think any order you put them in, you could probably justify. Florida State, a lot's going to come down to McKenzie Milton. And he apparently was healthy during the spring, which is an amazing story. He had the devastating knee injury at UCF a couple of years ago, but this is a guy who's, when healthy, been one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Top passer rating, big-time producer, 30-plus touchdown passes. I think Florida State's going to use 2 quarterbacks this year. Don't be surprised if you see a 2-quarterback system with McKenzie Milton and then situationally Jordan Travis. And I think, Kevin, both of those quarterbacks are actually going to media days in Charlotte for the Seminoles. But I think the question for Florida State is, where's your offensive line? We've seen the offensive line struggle for a couple of years now. Defensively, are you going to be able to rush the passer? You really struggled to rush the passer a year ago. And I think that adding Jermaine Johnson from Georgia, that's a player to watch. I think he could be one of the key playmakers for Florida State defensively. You have talent, but can you be consistent? I think that's the question for the Noles. And then Wake Forest brings back a lot of experience. I think the question for them is, can they make plays defensively? Can their defense match what they're able to do offensively? Because you look at Sam Hartman, Ja'Cory Robertson, you have a big-time offense that's capable of scoring 35, 40, 45 points. Can the defense catch up? And then, similar thing at Louisville, I think with Cunningham at quarterback, who's been really productive, Malik Cunningham. You have some playmakers. Keep an eye on Shai Wertz there, obviously, along with Kenderick Duncan, former Georgia Southern stars at Louisville. But I think you feel like Louisville's going to make plays offensively. Defensively, is that consistency going to be there? I don't think we know the answer to that question yet. But I think there's reason for optimism, Kev, with Florida State, with Wake Forest, and with Louisville. It's hard to kind of separate those 3 teams and feel like, okay, I know what I'm going to get here. I know what I'm going to get here. I know what I'm going to get here. It wouldn't surprise me if one of those teams emerges as a top challenger to NC State and can get up to 3rd in the division, but you got to find a way to be consistent. And I think that's going to be key for those 3.
And again, the ACC Atlantic, going to suffer a little bit in that there's nobody that can stand up to Clemson at the top, and that both hurts Clemson a little bit, BJ, and helps the league, or hurts the league, I should say, that you don't have a little more balance in the league. It's Clemson and nobody else on their side. And then in the Coastal, I mean, that side of the conference has the rep of being, just kind of anybody's ball game over there on that side of the conference. So where do you see the ACC in terms of I think you're ways away from finding a legit contender to Clemson right now, but I think the ACC really needs some teams that are in that 10 to 15 range, the 15 to 25 range, that can get in there and stay there and not have, as we kind of said, I think at the end of last season, the ACC had 2 teams in the top 25. That's obviously not going to get it done.
Yeah, I think the key is developing that second tier behind Clemson in the ACC Atlantic. And, when you look in the division, you've had some ups and downs. Syracuse has had some really good years. I think from the outside looking in, expectations are modest for this year, even though your guy Tommy DeVito, Kevin, is back at quarterback for the Orange. But I think when you look at kind of who's after Clemson in the ACC Atlantic, can NC State emerge as that top 15, top 20 type team? I think they can. Can Boston College be a consistent top 25 team? I think they can. And then, like I said, Florida State, you kind of don't know what to expect. There's been such transition in Tallahassee, and you have a team that has so many transfers. I believe the 3 players Florida State sending to Charlotte, McKenzie Milton, Jordan Travis, and Jermaine Johnson, all transfers at one point. So you're looking to see, can Florida State be consistent with a roster that's had a lot of attrition? The talent's there. And like I said, a lot depends on McKenzie Milton. I think if he's productive and Florida State exceeds expectations, maybe gets that win in week 1 over Notre Dame that we talked about earlier in the hour, all of a sudden Florida State becomes more of a national story. And I think that changes the way people look at the ACC Atlantic. Same for Louisville. Louisville's had some really good teams. Lamar Jackson, of course, over the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. You've had a Heisman Trophy winner. So I think Louisville is a known commodity, a known program nationally, but that consistency has been hard to come by. And I think Cunningham's going to produce, but defensively, where are you? So I think it's just solidifying that second tier in the ACC Atlantic. And when you're chasing Clemson, that's such an incredible barometer and standard to try to even get in line behind. But to me, the question is, who's the number 2 in the division? Who's the number 3? And can those teams that are trailing Clemson in the ACC Atlantic to your point, Kevin, emerges national teams where you're in the top 15, you're in the top 20, even if you're not the favorite to win the division. It's not Clemson and then a bunch of 7-5 and 6-6 and 5-7 teams. It's Clemson and then here's a team or two that, might be in the top 25 for a month. I think that's the key.
Yeah, I think the ACC obviously needs somebody else besides Clemson to kind of step up and consistently be good. Maybe it's Miami this year. Maybe it's NC State, as you mentioned. You can check out the ACC Atlantic predictions there, southernpigskin.com. We've got more to come here on this Tuesday as we count you down towards the All-Star game. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network.
Kevin.
Great to be here with you on this Tuesday, Kevin and BJ. It's 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. All-Star game tonight, BJ.
BJ, I don't think he was listening at all to the music I was playing. He just walked in raw, did not hear whatsoever that Kevin is a place on earth indeed.
Timeless classic.
I was trying to block that out of my memory, quite honestly.
Why would you try to block out such a beautiful song? Jim has the voice of an angel.
Which of the Kevin songs is your favorite, Kevin?
None of them.
BJ, which one's your go-to? Like, we need a little pick-me-up.
Say hello to Kevin.
I think How Far Is Kevin might be my favorite because it's the Los Lonely Boys. And whenever Kevin
gets
hears
me
that,
every time.
he hears that opening guitar lick, and he's just like, oh, come on. It's just such a roller coaster of emotion for him. But I think underrated is Kevin is a place on earth.
Yeah, because you get the ooh. Yeah, come on, Kevin. Kevin, which is your favorite?
None of them.
If you had to listen to one for the rest of your life, what would it be?
If one had to be your ringtone, which one?
Ooh, that's a good one.
I don't want any of them. I'm going to go the BJ Bennett answer. I don't want any of them. Having to listen to Jim's monotone voice every time my phone rings would be.
If you had to have Jim sing you one in person, Jim, in person, which one?
I mean, is
none of them an option?
Yeah, I really don't want Jim singing. Is what he does in those, is that technically called singing?
Yes.
Like, or is it just Jim
Like,
talking?
that's like
and
saying
artistic. It's
has to
art.
rhyme.
It's what?
It's art. It's artistic.
Ooh, you make me feel like I've been locked out of Kevin is a good one too.
Who sings that?
Bruno Mars. You want to hear it?
Of course.
DJ, I don't know if copyright versions you're allowed to hear it, but we'll play for Kevin.
Oh, okay, got it. I'll just pretend.
Yo, whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You make me feel like. Oh, it's so good. I think that's Amy's favorite.
I guess so. I don't know. I was interested in talking about the All-Star game. Apparently you guys are talking about
Who cares?
Bruno Mars. I mean, I get it. You're salty. It's not in Atlanta. It should be. It's fine.
I mean, well, yeah, but also
I just want to see Shohei pitch and hit. That's it.
So you're going to stop watching after the first inning?
I mean, isn't that what you do with All-Star games? Like, all the stars play like 2 or 3 innings, the main guys, and then they're out, and then you're like, okay, if it's
Aren't
competitive,
they
fine.
technically all stars?
No, it's not. Like, the main guys that are
You
in
said
there are
all of the
ones-
stars play in the first inning, but they're all stars, so they're all stars.
Okay, cool guy.
Words mean things, Kevin. What defines a star?
Does the winner still get home field
No.
advantage in the World Series?
They just get a bigger paycheck?
I guess. I don't know. I like it doesn't mean anything, and I'm fine with it.
You said you wanted to talk about this.
Well, no, but now
You have National League pride. If the National League wins, you're going to be like, go Braves, Mets, Nats, Marlins, and
He
Phillies.
better, because they've lost
I don't
seven in a
care
row.
about that. Yeah, I do have National League pride, even though I shouldn't because they don't ever win here recently. But
What are they, like 19-3-1, the AL is all time?
no, in the last little bit, the National League did have a run where they dominated big time, but
Whoa.
it hasn't been recently. I know I have National League pride just because we're Braves fans, and you hope that the National League is better than the American League. But when it comes to the All-Star game, it hasn't been here recently, at least not very often.
I mean, so you do the SEC thing where it's like if the Braves aren't in the World Series, you're rooting for the Dodgers because they're in the National League.
By and large, I will kind of. I mean, I won't be as fervent as like National League. Like I won't be chanting it, but yeah, I kind of tend to pull for the National.
Will you do it
League
with the
team.
National League East? NL East.
NL East.
NL East. NL
If it's the
East.
Mets, no. Everybody else, I can kind of,
That's fair.
I can kind of get behind him and try to get a ring. Then even when the Nationals won it, I'm like, it's fine. That's good. National League take one
Really?
back.
I did not feel that way at all.
No, not even.
I
a little
wasn't
bit.
like, let's throw a parade and celebrate their championship, but I was like, it's better than the Yankees winning it. Better
it?
than
I think I'd rather the Yankees win it than the Nationals or the Phillies.
No, I don't want the Yankees winning it, period, at all. They've won enough.
If the Mets
They've
play
won
the
plenty.
Yankees in a World Series, who do you want to win?
If the Mets play, boy, that's just bad all the way around. Thank goodness we're out of time, and I don't really have to legitimately answer that question. Let's see how the All-Star game turns out first. It's 3 and out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio, at Pigskin Radio, streaming live, ESPNCoastal.com, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. See you tomorrow. 3 and out.